There's never been a family feud quite like the one between the Hatfields and the McCoys. Though the tale has grown to almost mythical status, it has its origin in fact. Rita Braver talks to some real McCoys and some real Hatfields, too, for our Sunday morning cover story.
They were men who matched the mountains. They were Hatfields and McCoys. They were men, matched the mountains, and they were men when they were boys.
Jimmy Wofford doesn't just sing about the most famous feud in American history. He's a descendant of one of the warring families.
Middle name would be McCoy. My mother was a McCoy.
But when he and his friend and neighbor, Linda Hatfield Van Meter, were growing up, the subject of the Hatfield McCoy feud was too sensitive to discuss in these parts.
Our families didn't talk about it.
Didn't. My grandfather said, your hide is on the fence if you talk about it. You could get a busting in your rear.
But the rest of the world is fascinated with the story of the two clans, led by Randolph McCoy, known as Old Randall, and William Anderson Hatfield, called Devil Ants, though exactly why isn't known.
There's one story that his mother said he's so mean that even the devil's afraid of him.
He was the tough guy.
He was a tough guy, and he was a leader of men. What I sort of say is that Devil Ants was a man who took life by the horns, and Randall seems to be a guy that life took him by the horns.
West Virginia University professor Bil Richardson says it all began here on the West Virginia-Kentucky border in the wake of the Civil War, where some had sided with the Union, others with the Confederacy.
Huge amount of tension. You talk about brother against brother. That's exactly the kind of situation here, neighbor against neighbor.
Randall McCoy's brother, Asa Harmon, was one who fought for the Union.
He got wounded and came home. And then some of the Hatfields, who were Southern sympathizers and Southern soldiers, tracked him down and murdered him.
The Hatfields tracked down this McCoy and murdered him simply because he was a Union soldier?
Absolutely.
That was 1865. And so began skirmishes over land and valuable timber rights. But the next major battle came in 1878 over a hog of all things.
Well, Randall McCoy got into a dispute with Devil Ance's cousin and best friend, Floyd Hatfield, over a hog. He thought that Floyd had stole his hog. And people in those days, they needed that hog for protein. It fed a family of 4 for 30 days.
The case went to trial right here. This is a replica of the cabin where the local magistrate lived, who just happened to be a Hatfield. And, you guessed it, the Hatfields won. And after this trial was over, there was a murder over the hog trial.
Right. The main witness for the Hatfields was out hunting, and he ran into a couple of the McCoys. They pulled their guns, the Hatfield was killed, one of the McCoys was injured, and the other one was unhurt.
With all this animosity, you wouldn't think that Devil Ants Hatfield's son Johnsy would fall for Randall McCoy's daughter, Rosanna. Or would you?
Now this is the daughter of his father's greatest enemy. He spends one day with her, then takes her home and says, Dad, I want to marry this girl.
So do they get married and live happily ever after?
Well, that's not the way things happen in the feud. Devil Ants allows her to stay in the house, and she becomes pregnant. Johnsy still doesn't marry her, and so she leaves. But her father, Randall McCoy, won't let her back in his house. So she has to go stay with her Aunt Betty to have the baby.
Rosanna's child lived only 8 months.
6 months after the baby dies, Johnsy marries Rosanna's first cousin, Nancy McCoy, who coincidentally is the daughter of the first person killed in the feud.
You gotta say that is a pretty amazing story.
That's the reason this story has lived. It's unbelievable that these things happen, but they happen.
And kept happening. In 1882, Devil Ants Hatfield's brother Ellison is murdered by 3 McCoy boys, who in turn are executed by Hatfields. As the feud escalates, the Hatfield boys get an idea.
On New Year's Eve night, 1887, just before the dawn of 1888, a bunch of the Hatfields get all liquored up and drunk for New Year's. They say, hey, I've got a solution to our problem. Let's just go kill all the McCoys. Problem solved. And that's what they do.
Or at least try to.
There is an intense romantic excitement about these hill people.
As Walter Cronkite described in the CBS reenactment, the Hatfields set fire to old Randall McCoy's home.
Kill it.
2 of his children are killed, though he gets away. The state of Kentucky hires a marshal known as Bad Frank Phillips to round up the Hatfields.
He was tough, he was mean, he was ruthless. That's exactly what the McCoys wanted. And they come together at the culminating battle of the feud, a battle called the Battle of Grapevine Creek.
The History Channel miniseries shows the fever pitch this battle reached.
Yeah! Try to get yourself killed! Fire, baby! I need help! Kill them all! It's a trap! It's a... Hey! Get back! Get everybody back to the horses! Yeah!
Ultimately, after cases that go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, 8 members of the Hatfield gang get life in jail, and 1 is hanged.
There needed to be blood for blood, and he was the sacrifice.
Does that finally end the feud?
It had got to the point where they were tired of it, and they decided no more. There were a few skirmishes after this, but basically that is the end of the feud.
They were men who matched the mountains. They were Hatfields and McCoys.
Both old Randall McCoy and Devil Anse Hatfield lived until their 80s, their feud becoming the stuff of American legend. Even today, their descendants marvel at all the interest in the Hatfields and the McCoys.
What's fun about being part of this story for you?
You can laugh at what they don't know. Can't you?
Good one, Jimmy.
Thank you. You can laugh at the lies.
Can we laugh at what they do know?
And what they do know.
Okay.
Hell of a man, he lived his life in peace.
Why do you think people have been so fascinated by this story over the years?
Well, you've got amazing characters doing unbelievable things on a Shakespearean scale. You've got a love story, you've got murders, you've got the Civil War. It just keeps on giving.
They were men when they were boys.